Hello, biology. The purpose of this video is to give students an opportunity to get caught up on the notes if they missed any of them, or students that were absent to get the notes done originally. Section 13-1 deals with genetic engineering, how we have actually, well, not really genetic engineering, because we're not talking about like taking pieces of DNA out of one cell and inserting it into another. You're okay, pups. But really the process of picking desired traits in organisms and allow only those breeding opportunities to create offspring with the traits that we want. And it's called selective breeding. All right, remember, if you are not listening to me talking, that's totally okay. You will know I am ready to move on to the next slide when I point at the camera. And here we go. All right, selective breeding, we're going to abbreviate that as capital SB. Why do we do it? It allows only organisms with good traits to produce the next generation. So it's really choosing the traits that you want from the parents and ensuring or helping to ensure that those traits end up in the offspring. All right. Examples of selective breeding organisms: most domestic animals, pigs, cows, horses, dogs, cats, rabbits, turkeys, chickens, and most of our crop plants. So many of the animals that we eat, many of the plants that we eat, and many of the pets that we have come from selective breeding or came from selective breeding. All right, moving ahead. All right, term hybridization. So remember, when we were talking about genetic crosses, hybrids had parents with different characteristics. So it's crossing unlike organisms to combine good traits from both. I ride a hybrid bicycle. It's a mountain bike with the shock in the front and the heavier suspension and the funky handlebars that go kind of out. But I put street tires on it. So it would I'd have less friction when riding on the streets. So the two parents are a bicycle that's a mountain bike, a bicycle that's a street bike. Combining the wanted traits of each is hybridization. The benefit of that, offspring are usually stronger than either of the parents. And we'll get into polyploidy and what that means later. All right, moving ahead. All right, inbreeding. The continued breeding of organisms with similar traits. Typically, when you hear about inbreeding, you hear about humans inbreeding, and they're not inbreeding so they can get traits of both the parents. They're inbreeding because I'm not going to get into that, why they inbreed. But it's particularly dangerous in humans because if you are carrying a recessive allele, we'll get into this in chapter 14, but if you're carrying a recessive allele for a genetic disorder and you are mating with a family member, the possibility that they are also carrying that recessive allele is higher than if you are mating with somebody that is out of the family. You are more likely to get both recessive alleles together in your offspring, and most genetic disorders in humans are recessive. Benefit of inbreeding, and of course now we're talking about animals and plants, not humans, helps to ensure offspring will have traits of the parents, good traits. Moving ahead. Okay, what's the name of the process where individuals are chosen to ensure the appearance of desired traits? Take a look back at number 1. Yeah, you bet. We're talking about selective breeding. Good. Blank is the process of breeding two individuals with different but desired characteristics. Take a look at number 3 and 4. Yep. Hybridization. What's the process of continued breeding of individuals with similar characteristics? Take a look back at number 5. Yeah, you got it. Inbreeding. All right, here we go. Why do breeders try to cause mutations? So remember, mutations happen naturally. They happen during DNA replication. Why are breeders trying to induce or cause mutations? Remember, mutations are for sexually reproducing organisms. Of course, humans are one of those. There are only two sources of genetic variation: mutations that happen during DNA replication and crossing over that can occur during prophase. See, these are up here during prophase 1 of meiosis, where you exchange different genes. Remember, more variation equals a healthier population. If you have more genetic variation, more characteristics in your population, if you have a change in your environment or a disease, for example, you are more likely to have some organisms survive those experiences and be able to continue the species. Whereas if you have mostly one characteristic and that disease happens to kill organisms with that characteristic, you're left with nothing. Okay, so genetic variation is good for the overall health of a population. All right, how do you get more mutations? So breeders, well, first of all, mutations occur during DNA replication automatically. Breeders use chemicals and radiation to speed it up. And of course, there are chemicals in our environment that, what's the word I'm looking for? Speed up or increase the probability of getting mutations in your DNA. Smoking, drinking alcohol, getting too much sun. Okay, certainly radiation increases the rate of mutations. So breeders do this to try to increase the chance of getting mutations in their offspring. All right, moving ahead. All right, so what results do they get? Usually they get a few mutants with good traits in the offspring, and these are new traits that aren't found in the original population. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, moving ahead. All right, good mutations in bacteria. Hundreds of good bacterial strains have been created. For example, they've created bacteria that can actually clean up oil spills. They simply spread the dry bacteria on oil, and they hydrate, and they start to reproduce, and they consume the petroleum, and they actually can clean up the environment. All right, good mutations in plants. Some plant offspring result with double or triple the normal chromosomes, and that is referred to as polyploidy. And polyploidy organisms typically are larger and stronger. So larger is good, especially for like vegetables. Stronger, I mean, a vegetable being strong, what benefit does it give that in nature? But maybe more resistant to pests. maybe more resistant to frost. Okay, so they can actually survive harsh conditions. Okay, moving ahead. Does polyploidy exist in animals? No, mostly not. Animals, typically, it is fatal. Having the wrong number of chromosomes in animals usually aborts a fetus, if we're talking about humans, or you get some pretty serious genetic conditions. And again, we'll talk about some of those conditions in chapter 14. All right, moving ahead. Why is it important for breeders and farmers to induce mutations within a population? You might want to take a look back at number 7 for that one. Yeah, mutations lead to genetic variation, which makes the population stronger. And also mutations lead to new characteristics, desired characteristics in offspring. How does polyploidy make plants better than those with normal numbers of chromosomes? What advantage do they have? You might want to take a look at number 11. Yeah, typically species that exhibit polyploidy are stronger and larger. Okay, the useful function of selective breeding is to produce organisms that... Why do we do it? What benefit does it give us? Yeah, they have characteristics that are useful to us or desired by us. Crossing a plant that has good disease resistance with a plant that is good for food producing capacity is an example of... Again, the goal is to have both of those characteristics in the offspring. What do we call that? Yeah, it's hybridization. New species of plants that are larger and stronger are a result of... Yeah, polyploidy. The function of inbreeding is to produce organisms that... So inbreeding is kind of different than selective breeding. No, pardon me. It's kind of different than inducing mutations or hybridization or polyploidy. Inbreeding, you want to get organisms that are genetically similar. That's why it might be very beneficial to inbreed to puppies from the same litter, if those puppies have the characteristics that are valuable, like chocolate labs or certain types of rabbits or certain types of chickens. Increasing variation by inducing mutations is particularly useful with... Yeah, bacteria. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is it for the notes. I will see you in the Zoom.